Hello, family. Enjoy this great and beautiful moment with Afri Stories. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and comment. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and don't miss future videos from us. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The Zenith Empire Hotel was more palace than lodging. Its vaulted ceilings dripped with Swarovski crystals. Its marble floors gleamed under the chandelier light. And tonight, every corridor hummed with anticipation. Diplomats, billionaire moguls, and celebrities swept through the lobby in tailored suits and shimmering gowns. The occasion was a night of titans, a lavish gala celebrating Obinna Eze's coronation as Africa's businessman of the year. Ngozi Eze, his wife, stood at the entrance, momentarily dazzled by the spectacle. Her sapphire blue gown caught the light, reflecting a subtle glow that made her skin radiate. She paused, scanning the crowd for the man she had once known so intimately. Obinna was there, in the center, flanked by flashing cameras and microphones. He wore a custom tuxedo with gold cufflinks shaped like miniature oil rigs, an homage to the empire he had built. Or, so the world believed. Music pulsed from the ballroom, an orchestral melody mingling with hushed voices. A uniformed attendant approached Ngozi with a polite bow. "Madam, may I take your coat?" Ngozi nodded, smiling faintly as she handed over her wrap. She recalled the early days, before success had wrapped itself around Obinna like a second skin. They had shared late-night brainstorming sessions on how to fund his first drilling site. They would eat cheap noodles in a cramped apartment, scrawling business ideas on the backs of receipts. Back then, his gaze held promise. Now, she hardly recognized him. She walked deeper into the grand foyer, an elegant figure who belonged in this glitzy world, and yet felt like a foreigner. Despite the bustle around her, she felt oddly alone. The guests were here for Obinna, not for her, and he was too busy to notice her at all. "Mrs. Eze," came a voice from behind. She turned to see a young journalist with a press badge pinned to her dress. "May I ask you a few questions about your husband's latest achievements?" Ngozi's heart fluttered. Maybe she could share something meaningful. Perhaps she could remind the world of the humble roots they both came from. "Of course," she replied softly. The journalist started her voice recorder. "How does it feel being the wife of Africa's businessman of the year? Are you proud of how far he's come?" "Proud is an understatement," Ngozi said, choosing her words carefully. "But I think it's important to remember success is often built by more than one person." Before she could elaborate, camera flashes exploded nearby. Obinna had arrived at the ballroom's entrance, embraced by a throng of admirers. The journalist dashed away, eager to capture a front-row moment with the star of the evening. Ngozi watched the crowd surge around him. Politicians seeking favors, models hoping to be photographed by his side, and foreign investors sniffing out their next lucrative deal. Obinna was all smiles and polished charm. She made her way into the ballroom on her own. The gilded walls shone, and the air was thick with perfumes that mingled with the scent of exotic flowers. Tables draped in silk formed a semicircle around a grand stage where a band played a lively tune. Bright lights played across the polished floor, revealing a mosaic of Africa in gold leaf at the center. It was a masterpiece commissioned by Obinna to celebrate his heritage. Ngozi noticed the seating arrangement. A long table at the front, reserved for dignitaries. A name card read Mrs. Ngozi Eze, but it was shuffled to far end, separated from Obinna's seat by several chairs. She sighed, remembering how they used to sit side by side, exchanging quick glances whenever they felt nervous at important events. Now, her nameplate felt like an afterthought. Near the stage, Obinna laughed with a group of men in sharp suits. She recognized the Minister of Energy, 2 European ambassadors, and the CEO of a telecommunications giant. Not once did Obinna glance in her direction. She swallowed her disappointment and approached him. "Obinna," she said gently, placing a hand on his arm. "I've been looking for you." He turned, his smile stiffening. "Ngozi, I'm in the middle of a discussion. We'll catch up later. Okay?" His tone, curt and dismissive, set her heart racing with embarrassment. The men around him eyed her with mild curiosity, but Obinna quickly redirected the conversation to drilling contracts and prospective deals. Feeling the sting of being cast aside, Ngozi stepped back. She wandered to a quieter corner of the ballroom, where the music felt more like a distant echo. A waitress with a tray of champagne flutes offered her a drink. She took one, feeling the cool stem between her fingers. Memories swirled. How she had pawned her heirloom jewelry to help him fund his first project. How she had designed the pitch deck that landed him his biggest investor. And how, somewhere along the path to fame, he had forgotten her. Across the room, a hush fell as Obinna was ushered onto stage. The band stopped playing. In front of the audience, royalty, CEOs, and the media, he stood, exuding confidence. Cameras flashed, capturing his every move. He raised a microphone and, in a voice that commanded attention, began. Good evening, distinguished guests. Tonight, we celebrate ambition, the force that drives us to conquer new frontiers. Ngozi expected at least a nod to the sacrifices they both made, but Obinna never mentioned her. Not once did the words, "my wife," cross his lips. Instead, he regaled the audience with stories of his own audacity and grit, carefully omitting how they had once been a team. Her pulse thundered in her ears, each omission like a lash. When the applause thundered at the end of the speech, she felt more invisible than ever. She set down her untouched champagne and stepped back from the ballroom's radiant glow. In that moment, amidst the glitter and the grandeur, she understood she was no longer by his side. She was simply another guest in his ever-expanding empire, a silent figure whose contributions had been erased. Her crown was nowhere to be seen, or so everyone believed. The buzz from the ballroom bled into the hallway as Ngozi slipped out, seeking refuge in the quiet alcoves of the Zenith Empire Hotel. The rhythmic clack of her heels against the marble reminded her of her isolation. No one had followed to check if she was all right. She paused beneath a large portrait of Obinna, painted to immortalize his success. His eyes in the painting seemed to watch her, dispassionate and regal. A sudden wave of hurt washed over her. She leaned against the wall, her palm pressing against the gold-veined marble to steady herself. Shadows flickered across the corridor from passing guests, but none stopped. They were in a rush to either congratulate Obinna or sneak into the exclusive after-parties swirling in the upper suites. Ngozi felt the sting of her own insignificance among the elite crowds. She, who had once stood proud beside him, a memory sliced through the silence. The two of them huddled over a worn-out couch, pen and paper in hand, meticulously drafting a proposal they could barely afford to print. She recalled him saying, "If this doesn't work, we'll try again. We're unstoppable, right?" She had believed him without reservation. How had the unstoppable team turned into a lonely, forgotten woman, and a celebrated businessman unwilling to share the spotlight? She straightened her posture, drawing in a shaky breath. The night was still young, and she refused to let tears tarnish the image she had painstakingly built. Resilient, graceful, and composed. For once, she craved an ally, someone to confide in, but her circle had always revolved around Obinna's world. Slowly, that orbit had cast her out. As she prepared to return to the ballroom, a familiar voice made her pause. She recognized the thick accent of Mfon, Obinna's longtime friend turned advisor. It floated through the corridor from a small side room. Curiosity piqued. She edged closer. "What do you mean you're worried about Clara's demands?" Mfon hissed, clearly agitated. "You introduced her as your strategic partner. The press has already picked it up." Ngozi's heart twisted at the mention of Clara, the European heiress she had seen draped over Obinna's arm. She peeked through the cracked door. Mfon's silhouette stood in front of Obinna, who had his arms crossed defensively. Obinna sighed. "She brings fresh capital, Mfon. My expansions need her money and her father's connections. But she's starting to act possessive." Mfon let out a low chuckle. "You always knew she wanted more than a business deal. She wants your name, your influence, everything. Don't act surprised." Obinna rubbed his temples, frustration lining his brow. "Ngozi will come around eventually, right? She's used to being in the background." Anger coiled in Ngozi's chest. Background? The word smoldered. She'd been the backbone, the risk-taker, the believer. Yet here he was, casually dismissing her yet again. Mfon folded his arms. "She's your wife, not a minor inconvenience. If rumors start that you're stepping out on her, it could tarnish your golden image. At least keep the scandal contained. Obinna shrugged, and his nonchalance stung more than any insult. This is business, Mfan. Ngozi can handle it. She always does. Tears threatened to spill down Ngozi's cheeks. She muffled a gasp and stepped away, hurrying down the corridor. A rush of adrenaline fueled her anger, but deeper than that, she felt betrayed on a level she'd never experienced. She had given him everything she could. Her trust, her money, her ideas. And now she was nothing more than a placeholder, a support from the sidelines, as he'd once so cruelly put it. She retreated to a quieter lounge area, away from the swirl of the main event. Plush chairs and dim lighting offered a false sense of comfort. She sank into one of the chairs, head in her hands, questioning every choice she had made that led her here. A pair of guests entered, talking loudly about the award ceremony. One was a middle-aged woman in a flowing velvet gown, the other a younger man with slick-back hair. They paused near Ngozi, not recognizing her in the dim light. "I heard Mr. Ease might be partnering with royalty soon," the woman said, fanning herself with a program. "There's talk of some philanthropic project that could span the continent." The man nodded enthusiastically. Yes, I heard rumors Prince Ifedeo Adekunle was in attendance. Perhaps they're forging a deal." Ngozi's ears perked up at the mention of a prince. She hadn't seen any royalty among the guests, but she was too busy grappling with her own heartbreak to notice. Still, the idea intrigued her. Who was this prince? And what interest would he have in Obinna's empire? The pair wandered off, still chattering about the night's powerful alliances. Alone again, Ngozi tried to gather her thoughts. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother asking if she was all right. She typed back a quick reassurance she didn't entirely feel. She considered leaving, but pride anchored her to the event. Walking out would only confirm she was irrelevant. She chose to stay, if only to prove to herself, if no one else, that she was still standing. At that moment, a commotion erupted down the hall. Clara Von Meer, resplendent in glittering diamonds, was showcasing her entrance to the press. Cameras flashed as she glided forward, ignoring the murmurs that followed in her wake. Ngozi watched from a distance, her heart pounding with resentment. It wasn't just about the money or the fame. Clara represented a future Obinna was crafting without her. Shadows seemed to lengthen around Ngozi as she sat there, the echo of camera shutters acting like a metronome to her anxiety. For a fleeting moment, she considered confronting Obinna publicly, demanding recognition for her sacrifices. But that was never her style. She had always fought quietly behind the scenes, using her intellect and grace. Yet, quiet dignity had gotten her nowhere tonight. Her reflection shimmered in a nearby glass pane, the regal gown and carefully styled hair incongruous with the turmoil inside her. She wondered how many more humiliations she could endure before she broke. Whether Obinna cared or not was another question entirely. Steeling herself, she rose and headed back toward the ballroom, determined to face whatever came next. She had once built an empire alongside her husband. Maybe it was time she built one for herself. Little did she know, a pair of watchful eyes followed her every step, waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. The award ceremony climaxed under a shower of confetti and a blinding blaze of stage lights. Jazz music swelled as business leaders from across the continent took the stage to shake Obinna's hand. Ngozi lingered on the sidelines, her posture impeccable despite the tension in her shoulders. She could see a cold triumph in Obinna's eyes, magnified each time the crowd roared its approval. When the MC announced, "And now, for our final toast of the evening, may I invite Mr. Obinna Ease to the podium," the entire room hushed in anticipation. Ngozi braced herself. Obinna stepped forward, microphone in hand, adjusting his gold cufflinks for dramatic effect. "Thank you all for honoring me tonight," he began, words resonating through the high-ceilinged ballroom. "Our continent stands on the precipice of unprecedented growth, and I intend to be at the forefront." He paused as applause rippled. Ngozi's eyes scanned the crowd, ministers, royalty, media outlets, and international investors. She spotted Clara Von Meer gliding toward the front, The heiress's diamond earrings sparkled, their brilliance a stark reminder of the wealth she brought to Obina's ventures. Clara moved with feline grace, stopping near him, flashing a flawless smile for the cameras. Obina cleared his throat. In the realm of business, ambition is everything. It fuels our dreams, our innovations. But it also demands we stay sharp, never weighed down by unnecessary distractions. He smiled knowingly, a hint of arrogance creeping into his voice. Ngozi stiffened. The undertone was all too familiar, his coded way of dismissing any influence she once had. The crowd remained entranced, oblivious of Barb hidden in his words. Then came the moment that turned her blood to ice. Obina gestured broadly toward Clara. And as I forge new strategic alliances, I'm thrilled to welcome Clara Von Meer to our growing network. The spotlight swung onto the heiress, capturing her poised wave. The applause that followed was thunderous. Those some in the audience exchanged glances. They knew Obina had a wife. Introducing Clara so publicly felt like a statement. Ngozi's stomach churned as flashes from photographers turned the moment into a slow-motion nightmare. Obina's next words made her grip the edge of a nearby table. "Let's toast," he said, lifting a flute of champagne, "to the people who inspire us to reach higher, and to those who graciously support from the sidelines." Laughter bubbled among select members of the crowd, unsure yet following the lead of the charismatic host. Ngozi's heart pounded. She realized with crushing clarity that he was mocking her, her role, her sacrifices, her very presence in his life. Cameras panned the room, capturing every reaction. A cluster of journalists craned their necks, hoping to catch a glimpse of the wife's response. Every fiber of Ngozi's being urged her to storm out, but she stood frozen, her chest tight. The air itself felt acidic, burning her lungs with each breath. Clara accepted Obina's toast, clinking her glass to his, and a press photographer snapped a shot that would dominate tomorrow's headlines. The headline practically wrote itself. The glamorous heiress and triumphant tycoon, toasting to a future built on ambition. Ngozi's mind raced with painful memories, pawning her beloved grandmother's earrings to fund the initial oil exploration, personally drafting the feasibility reports that garnered investor interest, even cooking homemade meals for the early staff when they couldn't afford catering. And now she was relegated to a cruel punchline at her husband's greatest celebration. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Mfon, Obina's advisor. Concern flickered across his features. "Mrs. Ease," he whispered, "maybe it's best if you step out. The cameras." She shook him off, lifted her chin in defiance. "Don't tell me to hide. I won't be erased." His eyes widened at her uncharacteristic fierceness, but he said nothing as she walked away. Head high, she maneuvered to the tables to the exit. The laughter and clinking glasses of the toast continued in her wake, echoing like an insult that refused to fade. Outside the ballroom, the corridor felt like a sanctuary. Gone was a cacophony of applause and the flash of paparazzi bulbs. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She sank onto a plush bench, pressing a hand to her chest to steady the anger and hurt coursing through her. A staff member passed by and paused with concern. "Madam, do you need any assistance? Shall I call for medical help?" Ngozi shook her head, attempting a small smile. "No, thank you. I just need a moment." The staff member nodded sympathetically and continued down the hallway. Ngozi closed her eyes, trying to process the surreal betrayal of the evening. How had the man she once loved, who had spoken of building an empire for them both, transformed into someone so callous? Her phone buzzed relentlessly, messages from friends, curious onlookers, maybe even reporters looking for a comment. She silenced it. She couldn't bear to read them. Not now. All she wanted was the strength to stand up for herself, to declare that she was more than a sideline figure. Yet words felt small compared to the avalanche of Obina's wealth, influence, and public adoration. Exposing the real story behind his success could ruin him, but it would also drag her deeper into a scandal. She wasn't ready for that battle. Not here, not tonight. Footsteps approached, and she tensed. Expecting another staff member, or perhaps Mfon, she turned. Instead, she found herself staring at a figure in immaculate white agbada, accented by royal coral beads that seemed to glow in the soft light. His posture was regal yet approachable, and his calm, steady gaze radiated empathy. "Mrs. Ease," he said gently, dipping his head in a respectful nod. "I'm Prince Ifideo Adekunle. May I join you?" Her eyes widened. This was the prince rumored to be attending, the one some believed might partner with Obinna. She managed a polite bow of her head. "Prince Ifideo? Yes, of course." He took a seat beside her, his voice hushed. "I saw what happened in there. A cruel display, if I might say so." Ngozi looked away, tears threatening to betray her composure. "I wish I could undo tonight." Prince Ifideo's voice was unexpectedly warm. "You can't change what happened, but you can change what happens next." Startled by his insight, she turned to face him. He smiled, a kind of reassurance she desperately needed. For a fleeting second, the shame and anger lifted, replaced by something that felt like hope. Here was a stranger offering understanding in a night overshadowed by heartbreak. "You built an empire with him," the prince continued softly. "Perhaps the time has come to build one for yourself." His words wrapped around her like a lifeline. Though she barely knew him, she felt an undeniable sense of relief that someone finally saw her, truly saw her. And in that moment, she knew she stood at a crossroads, remain in Obinna's shadow or forge a new destiny that was hers alone. You built an empire with him. Maybe it's time to build one for yourself. Prince Ifideo's words echoed in Ngozi's mind, each syllable laced with a quiet promise she couldn't ignore. She lifted her gaze, finding warmth in his eyes. In contrast to the harsh glare of the ballroom lights, his gaze was steady and reassuring. She swallowed, gathering the courage to speak. "Why would you, a prince and a total stranger, care about my fate?" His smile grew, softening his regal features. "I stand for many causes, Mrs. Ease, education, women's rights, sustainable development, but none so pressing as uplifting those who've been overshadowed by corruption or greed. Tonight, I saw a situation that felt unjust." His sincerity disarmed her. When Obinna spoke of partnerships, it was always calculated, cloaked in ambition. But with Prince Ifideo, she sensed no hidden agenda, no arrogance. He radiated a calm determination that both intrigued and comforted her. "I don't know what I can offer you," she admitted. "My reputation is tied to my husband's, whether I like it or not." He inclined his head. "Your name carries more weight than you realize. You have vision, intelligence, and a story that can inspire countless people. If you choose to step into your own power, I believe you could transform not just your life, but the lives of many." Ngozi's chest tightened with a mix of fear and excitement. She glanced toward the ballroom doors, hearing the muted hum of the ongoing celebration. Obinna's celebration. "I've spent years contributing to his empire, building quietly in the background. Now, I'm not even sure what's left of me." Prince Ifideo's voice dropped to a gentle tone. "Sometimes we must lose what we know to discover who we are meant to be." They shared a long, considering silence. Finally, he rose to his feet, extending a hand. "Walk with me?" She hesitated, then slipped her hand into his. Together, they moved down a quieter corridor that led to a terrace overlooking the city lights. A mild breeze caressed them as they stepped outside. The skyline shimmered, the stars overshadowed by the bright architecture of the bustling city. From the terrace, they could still hear distant applause whenever another speaker took the stage. Ngozi's lips quirked with a trace of bitterness. That applause once energized her, but now it felt hollow. She realized she needed a new kind of validation, one that came from within. "How do you manage it?" she asked suddenly, turning toward the prince. "Being in the public eye, dealing with expectations?" He rested his arms on the terrace railing. "I'm not immune to scrutiny or gossip, if that's what you mean. But I try to ground myself in a mission greater than any title or rumor. That keeps me focused." She nodded slowly. "I used to have that sense of mission. Obinna and I, together, we had such big dreams for our region, our people. But somewhere along the line, her words trailed off. Money and power can corrupt," Prince Ifideo said, finishing her thought. "Yet, there are those who remain true to their convictions. You must decide which path you'll walk." Will you let Obina's betrayal define you, or will you forge your own purpose? Emotion tightened her throat. Deep down, she knew what she wanted, to stand for something meaningful, to restore her own self-worth. But fear still loomed, reminding her the cost of crossing Obina. Their finances, their connections, and everything she had built were intertwined with his empire. The prince sensed her hesitation. He turned, catching her gaze. I don't offer pity, Mrs. Ease. I offer a partnership, one rooted in genuine respect. If you join me, we could champion causes close to your heart. I have the platform and resources, and you have the insights and tenacity. She arched an eyebrow. So you want to help me rescue my pride? The words came out sharper than she intended. He shook his head, unruffled. I'm not interested in a personal vendetta against your husband. If that's your goal, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. My vision is bigger, empowering women, reshaping policies, transforming communities. Ngozi studied him, recalling how she'd once been driven by a desire to uplift others. And what exactly would you have me do? Lead with me, he said simply. The Royal Legacy Foundation is one of my family's philanthropic arms. We fund educational programs, healthcare initiatives, and economic ventures across Africa. We're expanding. I need someone with your business acumen and your understanding of local communities to help steer new projects. In particular, we want to focus on a women's entrepreneurship fund, something that invests in rising talents who lack support or capital. The idea sparked a distant fire in her chest. She remembered how she had struggled to find investors for Obina's early projects, how every bank turned them away until she mustered the courage to pitch the concept, eventually winning over a small consortium. She thought of the countless women with brilliant ideas, but no opportunities. A glimmer of hope lit her eyes. I've always believed in harnessing untapped potential, especially among women, she admitted. I've seen it firsthand, the brilliance that goes unnoticed. Prince Ifedeo nodded, solemn. Exactly. And with your experience, you can bridge that gap. Together, we can create a legacy that transcends any one person's ambition. But know this, stepping onto this path means stepping away from Obina's shadow. Ngozi inhaled, the cool night air filling her lungs. A sense of possibility danced on the edge of her consciousness, even as her past weighed heavily on her. She envisioned the scandal that might ensue if she publicly allied with the prince. She pictured Obina's outrage, Clara's smug satisfaction, the press swarming for a dramatic headline. Yet beyond that chaos lay the promise of something pure, a chance to stand on her own merits and shape a brighter future. Slowly, she turned to face Prince Ifedeo, her pulse racing. What do I need to do first? A satisfied warmth reached his eyes. Take the time you need, he replied. Decide with conviction. If you agree, contact me in the next few days. My staff will arrange everything. He handed her a small card embossed with a golden crest. She ran her finger over its raised edges, feeling an electric jolt of destiny. As they stood there, the city lights flickering in the distance, she realized she had already made up her mind. The seeds of transformation had been planted. Thank you, she whispered, meeting his gaze with newfound resolve. He offered a respectful bow. I'll await your call. A moment later, the terrace doors slid open, and the cacophony of the gala reached them once more. But for Ngozi, the night had taken an unexpected turn. She was no longer the unseen wife at the edge of the spotlight. She had taken a first step toward reclaiming a crown no one else could see, a crown forged not gold, but of her own untapped power. 3 months later, the social media rumor mill buzzed with a simple yet shocking headline. Ngozi is appointed chairwoman of the Royal Legacy Foundation, launches $100 million women's fund across Africa. The words ricocheted through business circles, fueling speculation and wonder. After the humiliating events of the Night of Titans, Ngozi had vanished. Journalists whispered about potential divorce proceedings, hidden medical issues, even rumored mental breakdowns. But none of those theories could hold a candle to the revelation now splashed across every major outlet. In reality, those 3 months were a whirlwind of planning, reflection, and unyielding work. Shortly after that fateful night at the Zenith Empire Hotel, Ngozi had contacted Prince Ifedeo. Within days, She was in Oyo, meeting with the foundation's board and unveiling her vision for an expansive program targeting women entrepreneurs. The adrenaline rush of forging a new path steadied her nerves, even as she grappled with ghosts of the past. On the day of the public announcement, photographers crowded the steps of a sleek, modern building in Lagos, the new headquarters of the Royal Legacy Foundation. Ngozi emerged dressed in a sharply tailored navy suit, an elegant silk scarf adorning her neck. Gone was the timid woman overshadowed by Obinna's triumph. She stepped confidently to a podium emblazoned with the foundation's logo. "Good morning," she began, voice echoing across the courtyard. Cameras clicked incessantly. "Today, I stand before you not as someone's wife, but as a leader with a mission to elevate African women who possess incredible ideas yet lack the platforms and resources to bring them to life." She paused, scanning the crowd of reporters. Some leaned forward eagerly. Others glanced at each other in disbelief. Here was Ngozi Ease, once defined solely by her husband's success, now stepping into the spotlight with undeniable authority. "This new fund," she continued, "will provide capital, mentorship, and global networking opportunities for women across the continent. We will foster local innovations in technology, agriculture, fashion, and more. Our potential is boundless, and the Royal Legacy Foundation is honored to invest in that potential." A thunder of applause greeted her conclusion. As she left the podium, Prince Ifedeo emerged, shaking her hand for the cameras. The press gobbled up the image, the poised chairwoman and the supportive royal figure. Speculation ran rampant. Were they romantically involved? Was this a strategic move to dethrone Obinna in the business realm? Ngozi ignored the gossip, focusing on her newfound calling. Behind the scenes, she worked tirelessly, reviewing proposals, meeting with local entrepreneurs, and assembling a skilled team of analysts and advisors. The more she immersed herself, the more she realized she had been stifling her own capabilities for years. Her insights on supply chain management and market forecasting, honed while helping Obinna build his empire, now proved invaluable to the foundation. She felt like she was finally coming alive. The world reacted with awe, curiosity, and in some corners, skepticism. Obinna's name inevitably popped up in discussions. Would there be a confrontation? Was she still tied to his fortune? But Ngozi pressed on, determined to prove that her work transcended any marital drama. Late one evening, after a marathon of meetings, her phone pinged. It was a message from her mother. "Proud doesn't even begin to describe how I feel. Shine on, my daughter." Tears blurred her vision. In her darkest moments, she had feared her mother's disapproval. Now, she felt embraced and vindicated. Still, there were nights she couldn't sleep, her mind racing with past hurts. She recalled the dagger-like words Obinna had used. She remembered how it felt to stand in that ballroom, overshadowed by Clara's glittering diamonds. But each painful recollection fueled her new purpose. A week before the official launch of the Women's Fund, Prince Ifedeo arranged a dinner at his family's estate. The centuries-old palace grounds boasted expansive courtyards filled with ancient sculptures. Arriving in a modest sedan, Ngozi felt a flutter of nerves. She was greeted by a butler who led her to a stately dining hall. A long table was adorned with fresh flowers, candlelight dancing over polished silverware. Prince Ifedeo rose from his seat, smiling warmly. "Ngozi, welcome. Please join us." He gestured at a handful of distinguished guests, including traditional chiefs, a global philanthropist from Canada, and 2 female entrepreneurs from Kenya and Ghana. Over the course of the meal, they discussed the challenges facing African women in business, the obstacles posed by limited infrastructure and cultural biases, and the urgent need for safe spaces to experiment and learn. Ngozi's passion shone through every word she spoke. Toward the end of the evening, Prince Ifedeo addressed the table. "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to formally welcome Mrs. Ngozi Ease as the new chairwoman of the Royal Legacy Foundation. In just a few short months, she has invigorated our mission, challenging us to dream bigger and work harder." Ngozi accepted the toast graciously, her cheeks warming at the sincere praise. The eyes that once turned away from her in pity or derision now gazed at her with respect. When the dinner concluded, guests trickled out, offering congratulations and future collaboration. Prince Ifedeo walked Ngozi to the grand foyer, where moonlight spilled across the marble floor. "You've come a long way in such a short time," he remarked, voice laced with admiration. She nodded, recalling her doubts the night he first approached her. "I owe part of that to you." He shook his head gently. "All I did was hold open a door. You chose to walk through it." They shared a moment of quiet understanding. She had not stepped into this role to spite Obinna or prove anything to Clara Von Meer. She had done it to reclaim herself, to rechannel her years of suppressed talent into meaningful change. For the first time in ages, Ngozi felt truly liberated. As she left the estate, driving through the peaceful night, she replayed the dinner's conversations in her mind. Tomorrow, new challenges would arise: media scrutiny, boardroom politics, perhaps even direct confrontation from Obinna. But she was ready. She was a queen in her own right now, her crown forged by resilience, intelligence, and a passion for empowering others. No one could ever take that from her. 6 months later, the African Global Business Forum lit up the lavish halls of a grand convention center in Johannesburg. Banners proclaiming Africa Rising adorned every corridor, and throngs of attendees queued for registration. The event was a who's who of the continent's most influential figures: presidents, tech innovators, billionaire philanthropists, and, of course, Obinna Ease. The rumor mill churned. Would Ngozi's attend? Her meteoric rise at the Royal Legacy Foundation made her a force to be reckoned with. Yet, no one had seen her publicly confront Obinna since that fateful night almost a year ago. Journalists buzzed with anticipation, hoping for a dramatic reunion. Obinna arrived first, stepping onto the plush red carpet at the entrance. Microphones and cameras engulfed him, each reporter vying for a soundbite. He donned a tailored gray suit and the same gold cufflinks shaped like oil rigs. Despite his confident grin, a hint of uncertainty lurked in his eyes. Whispers circulated that he had lost major contracts due to his brash approach with certain investors, some of whom were now aligning with more socially responsible ventures. But he played it off, flashing smiles and deflecting probing questions. Inside, the convention center's main auditorium boasted an elevated stage flanked by oversized video screens. Delegates settled into their seats, flipping through programs that listed keynote speakers and panels. A soft chime signaled the event's commencement. The lights dimmed, drawing everyone's attention to the stage. The MC welcomed the crowd, highlighting Africa's strides in technology, renewable energy, and entrepreneurship. Then came the announcement. Our next speaker is none other than Mr. Obinna Ease, renowned oil magnate and businessman of the year. Please give him a warm welcome. Applause filled the room, but it was notably less enthusiastic than what he once commanded. Obinna walked to the lectern, adjusting his tie. His gaze swept across the audience, searching. For a moment, it seemed he was looking for Ngozi, but her seat was conspicuously empty in the front row. He cleared his throat and began. "Distinguished guests, I'm honored to be here to discuss the evolving landscape of business in Africa. We stand on the precipice of new frontiers." His voice resonated, polished and familiar, but many in the audience wore guarded expressions. His downfall from unstoppable titan to just another player in a competitive field was the talk of the corridors. Rumor had it that key investors had shifted support to philanthropic alliances, particularly those championed by Prince Ifedeo and Ngozi Ease. Midway through his speech, the side door swung open. The gentle hum of conversation rippled through the hall as people turned. Ngozi stepped inside, an air of quiet confidence preceding her. She wore a regal white suit with intricate, subtle embroidery. Her hair was swept into a graceful updo, and a single, elegant necklace adorned her neckline. A hush fell. Cameras clicked eagerly. Obinna faltered on stage, momentarily losing his train of thought. He quickly recovered, forcing a smile. "And, as I was saying, we must adapt to the demands of a socially conscious market." Ngozi nodded politely at a few people who offered quick greetings. She moved toward a reserved seat in the front row, not directly in Obinna's line of sight, but close enough to be noticed. Sitting calmly, she listened to the remainder of his speech with an inscrutable expression. When Obinna finished, scattered applause followed. He stepped aside, looking restless. The MC took the microphone. Thank you, Mr. Ease. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce someone who has made tremendous strides in supporting women entrepreneurs and social development initiatives across the continent. Chairwoman of the Royal Legacy Foundation, Mrs. Ngozi Ease. A sharper, more enthusiastic applause erupted. Ngozi rose, her steps measured as she ascended the stage. The tension in the air was palpable. Obinna stood awkwardly to one side, uncertain whether to leave or stay. In the end, he stepped back, allowing her to lectern. Cameras zoomed in. The moment was primed for capturing every flicker of emotion. Ngozi began, her voice steady and resonant. Thank you for that warm welcome. It's an honor to be here. She paused, scanning the audience, making deliberate eye contact with various dignitaries. She let her gaze drift over Obinna without lingering. Africa's future hinges on inclusive growth. We cannot thrive if half of our population, our women, are underrepresented in business and leadership. A wave of affirmation swept through the crowd. Ngozi outlined the foundation's current projects: microfinance programs for rural women, partnerships with tech startups, and a newly launched educational initiative that paired young girls with industry mentors. The auditorium buzzed with engaged energy, her every word resonating with authenticity. Obinna shifted uncomfortably at the side, overshadowed by the clarity and impact of her address. Even some of his allies in the audience appeared captivated by her vision. It was clear she had stepped onto the global stage not as an accessory to anyone else's success, but as a leader in her own right. As she wrapped up, the applause was thunderous. Reporters jostled for position, calling out her name. She gracefully waved, then stepped back, allowing the next speaker to take the spotlight. With the session ending, attendees poured out into the lobby. A throng of admirers and journalists circled Ngozi, eager for a soundbite or a handshake. Out of the crowd, Obinna emerged. Tension crackled between them. No cameras were in immediate range, as most were focusing on her. He tried to muster a smile. Ngozi, can we talk? She observed him calmly. The arrogance he once wore like armor seemed to have cracked, revealing a vulnerable uncertainty. Of course, she replied, her tone polite but distant. He led her to a quieter corner, near a display of African art. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. You've accomplished a lot. I never expected you'd. Stand on my own, she finished, arching an eyebrow. There was no bitterness in her voice, just quiet strength. He sighed, looking genuinely remorseful. I made mistakes. Hurtful ones. Things got out of control. The deals, the alliances, Clara. His voice trailed off, heavy with regret. Ngozi maintained her composure. She felt neither vindictive nor nostalgic. Obinna, I hope you find what you're looking for. I have no interest in dwelling on the past. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening with an emotion she couldn't decipher. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. She inclined her head. Thank you. In that moment, a sense of finality settled between them. The cameras found them again, but they snapped only a polite exchange, a brief nod, not a melodramatic confrontation. Obinna slipped away, returning to his entourage. Ngozi was quickly ushered by an assistant toward another panel she was scheduled to join. As she walked away, a quiet satisfaction filled her. She wasn't seeking revenge or an apology. Her mission was larger than any personal feud. She had reclaimed her identity, rediscovered her purpose, and built a kingdom of her own, no longer a footnote in someone else's story. She was the author of her own narrative. She left the convention center that day with her head high, her vision clear. The crown that once went unrecognized was now visible to anyone with eyes to see, not wrought of gold, but of resilience, empathy, and unstoppable drive. And that, she understood, was worth more than any title her ex-husband or the world could bestow. Her reign had just begun. The end. Enjoyed the story? We invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing more beautiful stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your effort. See you again.